John, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Thank you.
I've got a cool topic today. We hear this more and more now, even from parents at PAL. The big thing now is influence of friends of kids. So, how do we identify if my child is spending time with a bad kid or negative influences? And how do we address those concerns that, my child is hanging out with a bad influence?
Yeah, I call friends when it's teenagers, I call them co-conspirators
Oh, I like that.
uh,
I can,
because,
that one hits home with me.
well, it's because that's really what they're doing is they're conspiring against the adult community,
Mm,
their teachers and their parents. And yeah, that can be a very problematic situation when your child begins to hang out with the wrong people. First of all, I would say to parents, don't judge the wrong people on the basis of demographics,
oh yeah,
socioeconomics, and
sure,
things like that.
100%.
My son, when he was coming up, he got involved with a group of kids whose parents were very wealthy people. They all lived in the toniest neighborhood in town. And what I discovered was that these kids were committing acts of vandalism in their neighborhood.
Mm,
They were breaking people's property. They were harming people's pets. And when I found this out, and I found it out courtesy of a person who lived in the neighborhood who called me and said, I know you don't want Eric to be involved in this kind of stuff, and he's hanging out with these kids, and he actually said, I know you'll put an end to the relationship. Well, here's the problem. You try and put an end to some of these relationships, Noel, and what you do is you actually drive them underground
100%.
so that the child becomes more devious and it begins lying to you about nearly everything. And I knew that. And so I went to Eric and I said, I got a phone call today. Didn't identify the individual. But I said, this guy says you're hanging around with a bunch of kids who are creating problems in that neighborhood. And I am not going to tell you to stop hanging out with those kids.
Mm,
But what I am going to tell you is I now have a pipeline into that neighborhood. And through that pipeline, if I hear that those kids committed an act of vandalism and you weren't at home when the act of vandalism was committed, you are going to be held 100% responsible for it. I'm going to take you to those people's house. I am going to have you apologize to those people. Mind you, even if 5 kids were involved, I'm not going to 5 other
right,
parents.
right, right, right.
It's going to be you and them. You're going to apologize and you're going to ask those people how you can make restitution and atonement. And a week later, Eric comes running in the house one afternoon. He says, Dad, you've got to stop. I've got something to explain to you. Those guys were hatching a plot, to commit some vandalism. And I made an excuse and I left. And Dad, I'm home. I'm home. And
So when you get the call, I was here,
yeah,
Dad.
that's right. Yeah. And he never hung around with those kids again. But the thing is, Noel, that you've got to prove yourself to your children.
Mm,
You've got to prove that what you say you mean.
mm,
And that brings up the issue of being mean. And I tell parents all the time, you need to learn how to be mean. Mean is not screaming and yelling and threatening and chasing your child through the house, snapping a belt over his head.
I had the
You
wooden
know,
spoon growing up, so yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, this yelling, screaming, stuff like that, that's crazy parenting. That's not authoritative parenting. Being mean is simply convincing your child that you mean exactly what you say.
Hmm,
That is what children call mean.
that's huge.
And you should want your children to call you mean on that basis.
I love that. That's fantastic. Um, Picking up on that same thing, What kind of strategies would you use to help your child navigate peer pressure and make good, positive social choices?
Well, for one thing, these days, I would not allow a child to get on social media. Uh, the the pressure that children are feeling on social media uh, is extremely intense, and research has now confirmed that participation in social media for young adolescents, especially, is contributing to serious mental health issues.
Hmm.
So the first thing I would do is ban social media from my child's life. And sometimes when I have said this to people, people say, "Well, he won't have a social life." And my answer is, yeah, human beings are social creatures. If we can't develop a social life over here, we're going to go over here.
100%.
Yeah,
I'm going to
right.
find another way.
And so the fact that you shut social media off, that you don't allow that you don't support those kind of devices, does not mean your child is not going to have a social life. He's just going to transfer his social energies, if you will, into another area. So
Yeah, like maybe communicating
yeah, we're
face to face with
communicating,
somebody.
yeah, not
Right.
walking around with a phone in your
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we have that policy here at all our programs at PAL. There's a zero cell phone policy in any program that we do. So we really value that, social media, even the phone presence here in social media and in PAL, because you know, let's take a break from all that. Let's communicate. Let's get all these kids together in a room, having a good time and, interacting with each other. And, kids that don't normally have the same social circles come into our building and now there are new friends and new social interactions. So that it helps take us to another level.
Yeah, well, PAL is a cell phone free zone. Schools ought to be cell phone
I
free
agree with
zones.
that statement.
Families ought to be cell phone
Mm.
free zones. Um, there isn't any indication whatsoever that these devices are enhancing children's lives. They're addictive, and when you present a child with a device that he can definitely become addicted to, you're talking about a threat to the child's mental health.
So, what would you say about, we're on the topic of friends, we have so many parents out there that try to be their kids' friends. Like, you see that all the time, and there's always that pull. I mean, even as a parent, like, I want to be my kids' friends, but at the same time, I have to be the authoritative figure.
Yeah, this is new parenting. This attitude on the part of parents that their job is to establish a wonderful relationship with their children. Believe it or not, this was not the attitude in the 1950s. And when you're talking about leadership, consider this. You can't really, if you're in the position, if you're in a leadership position in someone else's life, you really can't afford to try and cultivate a wonderful relationship with that person. You can be polite, you can be respectful, you can be helpful, but you must not cross the line of establishing a fundamentally wonderful relationship with this person. There needs to be, in any leadership environment, Noel, and I'm not telling you something you don't already know, obviously, but there needs to be some distance, emotional distance between the leader and the people or the person he's leading. Otherwise, very quickly, you get into a codependent relationship where it becomes pretty much impossible for you to present yourself to the child as an authority figure.
It's funny you said that because one of my mentors in a company I used to work with back in the day, you hear a lot of companies and organizations, oh, we're all family here. And those guys were like, no, 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 time out. We're not family here. We're a team. There's a
Yeah,
difference,
big difference.
big difference.
Yeah.
And it really ties into what you're saying about being your child's friend or being a leader.
Yeah. Well, I was counseling with some parents recently who told me the mother said, my daughter is my best friend. And I said, well, that statement in and of itself explains why you're having the problems that you're having with your daughter, because you don't obey your friend. And you're wanting your daughter to obey you, which is a perfectly legitimate desire on your part, but you're not going to accomplish that as long as you're trying to be your daughter's friend.
Mm, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Well, I want to thank you so much for talking about friends and friendships and the role as a parent, as a friend or a parent. Thanks, John.
You're welcome, man. Thank you.